Mark Rogers TV talking Ohio State football with Claire Crawford from the Ozone.net. Her podcast right there with Joe Dexter. Oh, hail no. Subscribe to my YouTube channel for the best in college football coverage and my conversations with some of the best bloggers and broadcasters in college football. You can find the long-form audio version on Stitcher, Podbean, and iTunes. Just search Mark Rogers TV. Nebraska shows up at 3-3, lost to Wisconsin by 3 touchdowns. It was a very competitive game for about 3.5 quarters, 10-10, and then they were typically a score behind before Wisconsin lowered the throttle. And there's trouble in Lincoln. Mike Riley won 5 games his first season, rebounded with 9-4 last year, but it was one of those top-heavy 9-4s when they kind of pranced through the early part of the schedule that was rather easy. Oregon was down. And then they hit that brick wall in Columbus, 62-3, and then it was all downhill from there. They faced Wisconsin and weren't competitive most of the rest of the season, lost the bowl game. And now here they go, losing to Northern Illinois at home, losing to Oregon, who is now losing games in the Pac-12. So that's not looking rather good for Nebraska. And having a coach in place in Bo Pelini, who was much criticized by Husker Nation, who wants to win big, wants to win national championships because that's their pedigree, and they don't understand the place where they currently sit in college football. But Bo Pelini was winning 9 games every year, and now they've got a coach that's going to struggle to win 4 or 5 this year. And my understanding from some people that I know around the Nebraska football program is that they're not going to cut ties mid-season and do one of those deals. They're a little bit more traditional in that sense, and they're going to let Mike Riley finish it out. And barring a miracle, if he throws in a 4-8 or a 5-7 as expected, he's out. So I don't know your thoughts about Nebraska football. We expected a little bit more from the Huskers when they joined the Big Ten, let's see, in 2010 or 11.
And I think that if we're going to measure the temperature of anybody's seat in the Big Ten, I think Riley's is the hottest for sure, just because of the expectation level at Nebraska. I think all Husker fans believe they can be more. But again, the expectation level is going to it's going to determine how much slack you are given as a coach. And, you know, they're hanging in that game with Wisconsin. At one point it was tied up 17-17. And it should be giving the Buckeyes an indication as well that they are also going to need another fast start in order to make sure to get things off in the right direction, especially since they're traveling to Nebraska. I think they're still favored by 22.5, depending on what you're looking at. But it would be a win against Ohio State would go a very long way for Mike Riley as far as keeping his maybe even just kicking the can down the road a little bit, but it certainly would be a feather in his cap.
Rutgers, sorry we're discounting you, but we're discounting you. So this is the true road test, the first one that we talked about during the offseason, Claire, Ohio State going to Nebraska. And when I talk about road test, not necessarily from an athletic standpoint on the field, but all the surroundings of a big-time program. And it is still a big-time program. There's still going to be I don't know what the capacity of the crowd is, 85 or 90,000 people packed. And the name brand and the setting still looks, boom, big-time Nebraska football, top 10 team. Once they kick off, and if the play of the athletes on the field takes hold, then Ohio State should separate itself fairly easily. But again, Nebraska put up a fight against Wisconsin. But the setting versus what we talked about in the offseason, young players, and this is a young team for the first time, not, facing a hostile crowd, and we'll see how they react.
And I think the closest thing that we can possibly get to this is the atmosphere of the Indiana game. There are not going to be quite as many Buckeyes in Lincoln as there were in Bloomington, but certainly Indiana was a good way for them to dip their toe into that environment. Night game on the road, conference opponent, but this is not going to be Bloomington. Make no mistake about that. This is a much more hostile environment. No disrespect to Bloomington, but the Buckeyes were outnumbering the Hoosiers there for sure. So certainly it is going to be a much bigger test for a young team. And then especially some of these guys are having to step up especially the corners are now having to step up, which they weren't really expecting to have to. It's Denzel Ward is going to be missing. It's just the first half, I believe, and it's really important for them to have to come on the road in this environment and next man up mentality.
Claire, I'm going to have you make the call on this. And was I disrespecting Rutgers more by calling them out, or was I disrespecting Indiana even more by completely forgetting that Ohio State went to Indiana the first week of the season? That seems like a preseason game or something. It was just so odd. Thursday night, Big Ten game, first game of the season. I completely forgot about going to Indiana.
We're just we're going to blame that on the fact that it feels like a million years ago.
Yes, and my memory loss.
Definitely not a test. Although I'm sure Urban Meyer, I think he's even mentioned like, "Hey, I opened my big mouth. I'm done with these night games. I'm over it. I don't want to have to do it anymore." It's tough for them to have to come home, and they're not home until sometimes 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. So I'm sure they're very done with these night games.
All right, everyone, just to get you a little prepped on Nebraska, Tanner Lee throws a lot of interceptions. I watched about half the Wisconsin-Nebraska game as I was flipping back and forth, Michigan State, and some other stuff across the country. But he was completely robbed by his wide receivers on several occasions. When the kid can throw the ball, there's a reason he has the starting job. He has the arm, and he has arm talent, meaning he can split the window and throw the ball in tight spaces when he needs to. I think he probably trusts it too often and gets himself into trouble. So he's had an interception issue this season, but man, the kid can sling it. Then we also have Devine Ezigbo. He is their top running back, typically gets about 100 yards, and that's going to be severely challenged against Ohio State. His rushing stats could take a major hit. And Nebraska, despite all the drops at the wide receiver position, they do have not elite wide receivers, but they have really good wide receivers, probably top level in the Big Ten, probably the top 3 to 4 to 5 sets of wide receivers in the Big Ten. You would find Nebraska right there with guys like Stanley Morgan Jr. and DeMornay Pierson-El, who seems like he's been in the program forever, and I've expected to have a big career, but quarterback issues have deprived him of the football. And also J.D. Spielman, who is related to Chris Spielman, is on the wide receiver core there at Nebraska and getting some much-needed playing time and coming up with some receptions. So Nebraska, they're capable, but they are certainly not elite in terms of talent. They've recruited in that fringe top 25 range. So think Iowa, think Michigan State in terms of talent level. That's about where they are. And they're going to need to play the A-plus game to beat Ohio State, but it's possible.
And the comfort, if you're an Ohio State fan, and what you want to take solace in, is Buckeyes are second in the nation defensively as far as tackles for losses are concerned. The defensive line just keeps getting deeper and deeper and more cohesive as the season goes along. And it seems like it doesn't matter who Urban puts out there, they just end up going out to perform. As far as negating the rushing attack, like you said, it might be a little more of a challenge. But with a quarterback that throws as many interceptions as he does, I feel like that defensive line getting pressure will allow the secondary a little more leeway as far as taking the ball away. Jeffrey Okudah's got to step up for Denzel Ward, and it might be an opportunity for him to shine.
Ohio State, of course, always working on that passing game. But J.K. Dobbins, Mike Weber, listen up. Jonathan Taylor, Wisconsin running back, who's not as fast or as quick as J.K. Dobbins. And it would be an argument over the quality of his game versus Mike Weber. 249 yards rushing, 10 per carry. There is some yardage to be gained and some big plays in the making against this Nebraska rush defense. So Ohio State can pick its poison and go to work and really work on the offense, and should put up some big points against what's otherwise a pretty quality opponent this week. All right, Claire, you got anything else for us?
I can't think of a thing other than prayers for Brandon Bowen. It's a really tough injury. He's not going to be back. I think they said even tibia and fibia. And go Bucks.
All right, Claire Crawford, the ozone.net, join her right there with Joe Dexter for Oh Hail No. It's a very unique and entertaining podcast where they talk, yes, hardcore football talk, but a lot of fun surrounding the discussion as well. And Claire and I try to get together as much as possible to provide Ohio State football talk right here. Subscribe to my YouTube channel if you love college football. If you don't, why are you watching? So subscribe, and then the audio versions again, Podbean, iTunes, and Stitcher. Just search Mark Rogers TV. We will see everyone next time. Claire, we appreciate the conversation.
Thank you for having me on, as always.